March 27th sees the release of two anime-style hack-and-slash Souls-like games, AI Limit and First Berserker Khazan. They may look similar, except they don't, but they play very differently, and if you're on a budget or only trying to add one game to your insane backlog, you may wonder which one is worth buying, if not both of them. Well, I played both their demos for an hour each, back-to-back in one sitting, so let's go through the gameplay and see what stands out, starting with AI Limit. AI Limit's demo doesn't offer much story. You just kind of wake up face down in some sewer water without a weapon or a clue. Wandering for a bit fixes one of those problems, picking up a rusty sword that you just know is going to be your mainstay for the entire playthrough. Imagine. Right away, the movement feels decently smooth. You've got snappy pivoting and can spin around with no lag, so it immediately feels better than Code Vein, the game this game will most often be compared to outside of this video because they are, for most intents and purposes, the exact same game. It feels like whoever made AI Limit just wanted to do Code Vein, but better, so it's neat that it looks like they're already succeeding. But this demo will feel very familiar if you've played Code Vein before, down to the setting, the enemies, the branch checkpoint things, etc. Not long after your sword's in your hands, the game throws the quintessential, optional tougher enemy at the beginning at you, and because I'm brave and bold like Batman, I'm charging in there. Gives you a good sense of what attack telegraphs are going to look like, lets you practice dodging, and while I need to heal a few times using these mud balls I picked up, I am able to conquer the big dude and still be a kick-ass gamer even though I'm almost 31. This also lets you test out the sync rate mechanic, which is this game's main system to maintain during combat. As you land hits, you gain higher sync rate, while taking hits diminishes it. The higher the sync rate, the more damage you do, while you can also spend percentages of sync rate to do special weapon skills or spells, which also get buffed the higher your sync rate is, so you don't want to just hang on to 100% doing regular attacks. Your skill damage will very much warrant spending responsibly. If it gets too low though, you start to suck ass, but the gauge will autofill up to 50% if you give it time and stop getting your back blown out. The other main thing I would point out here is that there is no stamina. No stamina bar in a game like this is huge, especially with the emphasis on aggression and sync raising. You'll want to go buck wild out there and you'll be able to. About 8 minutes into the demo, we fight our first boss, called the Sewer Cleaner, which in this case probably means his job is to kill all the people who live down there. We won't let him do that to us, though, making use of our dodges and our sword skill that costs 20% sync rate, which seems to stagger bosses out of attacks, kind of similar to Stellar Blade in that regard. This dude barely does anything, and I kill it without even getting hit. Soldier of Godric-ass boss, but he gives me my first spell, which I immediately forget to use, because soon after we're introduced to the Branch Weaver, aka Lady Who Knows What's Up, that our journey now revolves around listening to. She tells us our memory can return if we continue to bring life to these branches scattered around that serve as bonfires where you can upgrade stats, enhance weapons, and teleport between them. I choose to put all my points in strength because I want my damage output to be as giant as possible, and then the Branch Weaver offers us a choice of 3 non-rusty weapons to replace our trash. You can pick another longsword if you're boring, or dual blades if you're going to do a speedy dex route, but I'm obviously going to go greatsword here to match the level ups I just did. I like the action on it. The swings aren't too slow, and your choice even comes with a couple stat growths to help realize its potential. I hope that's not just for the demo, because that's a good idea. The greatsword also has a new weapon ability that gives you a nice double hit with improved poise that enemies have a hard time interrupting, that also interrupts them. And the charged heavy swing gives you another double slash, reminiscent of a halberd from a Dark Souls game, which I appreciate. Eventually, I remember to try out the spell, which is a laser shot that costs 20% sync each time and does decent damage, but definitely not something you'll want to spam for the cost. 17 minutes in, we open a safe and acquire new armor with much better stats than ours, easy equip. Now our character looks less like a sewer rat and more like a respectable blader, which is what she is apparently. A couple minutes later we acquire the counter ability, which is a parry that costs 10% sync rate, and proper timing will open the enemy up for a visceral attack. The timing feels easy to nail once you actually know how fast the particular attack you're parrying is, and it's a neat tool to have in your arsenal. Plus if you land the counter, it doesn't actually cost sync rate, and performing the visceral will give you a bunch back in return. 26 minutes in, we find our next branch level up thing, and I continue to pump points into strength because I have no muscle mass in real life. There aren't that many stats to choose from. You've got your standard health stat and life, not to be confused with vitality, which I think affects sync rates. Then you have strength for strength scaling weapons, technique for technique scaling weapons, aka dex, and a spirit stat that improves things relating to spells. You can probably do a magic build, though how effective it is anyone's guess in this game. Soon after that, we encounter our first blader enemy and are given a new alternative to the parry as an option called blocking. Blocking is apparently something you have to equip instead of parrying, which will make your L2 button hold up a shield instead that steadily decreases sync rate while it's up. But since there's no stamina, you don't really have to worry about getting staggered, and if your shield blocks enough attacks, you can do a shield bash thing in effect that does a bunch of damage and replenishes some of your sync gauge. Ideally, you'll be blocking methodically and attacking between blocks to keep your rate up, and you'll be surprised how efficient you are at blocking seemingly dozens of attacks in quick succession. This blader's a feisty one, almost killed me, but the blocking helped big time, though I wonder if it would have just been easier to learn the timing of one of the moves and parry it consistently to get viscerals. At least there's options. We continued to move through the very samey looking tunnels. I actually got lost at one point and ended up back almost near the beginning somehow after I fell off a broken walkway and didn't notice I was going backwards for way too long because the environment doesn't have many distinctive areas, but we course correct and end up at the second and last boss of the narrative demo. This guy is a huge step up in difficulty compared to the first guy. He's got combos, he's got HP. I mostly dodge instead of parry to try to internalize timings, but I get clipped here and there, eventually taking enough damage to undergo my first death after doing a third of his health. Next time it's all business though. I get a parry on the first hit just to flex on him so he knows it's about to be a very different outcome, but I don't rely on it. When he gets down to half health, he form changes like Father Gascoigne and becomes beastly, getting lunge attacks and more jilted combos that have sudden quick hits in him. He can have a hard time targeting you with some of them though, since he travels so far with some of the lunges. I dodged a couple moves just by standing there while he attacked where I was 5 seconds ago. Still a decently fun fight. I beat him on my second try, and shortly after that you finally reach the surface to this dusty town with a giant wall behind it, and the demo ends. You do unlock a new boss challenge in the demo after doing that, but I don't like getting dropped into a mid-game fight with my stats all predetermined and stuff. I want to build my way up to that, so I'd save that for the full game, which if you're a PS Plus member, the pre-order will only run you just about $30. I don't know how long this game is, but the fact that it's only $30 or around there is a big selling point if you like the combat and what you play in the demo, which I did. First, Berserker Khazan is the full 60. And let's check that one out now before we start comparing them at the end. The first Berserker Khazan's demo starts off very differently to AI limits, namely because it wants to tell you the story of what's happening. You are Khazan, a general convicted of treason, tortured, bloody, rendered unable to wield weapons via tendon severing, which is just ugh. I can always feel that in my wrists when a game mentions that, like Commander Greel in Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. But so he's been sentenced to exile, and they're transporting him in this wagon cage until an avalanche launches them all off a cliff. This ghostly spirit thing calls out the Khazan and inhabits its body, vying for control of it and healing his wounds in the process. From there you take control, picking up a sword and an axe to dual wield, and the tutorialization begins. The combat in this game is a bit more sluggish. You've got light and heavy attacks, as well as a stamina bar that takes a bit to get used to again, but the combat does feel punchier too. The slams you're doing at the end of combos feel strong. As you expect, we can also fight optional tougher enemy they put in the beginning in this game too, and it's a big yeti with some combos. Unlike AI Limit, first Berserker Khazan has perfect blocking, like Sekiro or Lies of P, where you can tap block right before an attack hits to do posture damage to your opponent for less stamina than it would take to block normally. This game also has a perfect dodge with the same timing, but given the choice I'd rather block, because then if I mess up at least I'm still blocking most of the time, whereas it doesn't seem like you get many, if any, invincibility frames from dodging if it's not a perfect dodge. You'll still want perfect dodge for unblockables, but those don't really get introduced in the hour of the demo I played. Standard Souls-like stuff abounds. Soon we run into our first armored tank guy who needs his armor staggered with heavy attacks because light attacks don't phase him, though they still do damage. If AI Limit's combat feels like a combination of Code Vein and Stellar Blade, Khazan's feels like a slower Neo mixed with Sekiro and Lies of P, and the distinction between those last two things is enough to where you can feel both their unique influences on it. Like, the perfect blocking feels more like Lies of P because the window is tight, unlike Sekiro, but then the stagger damage thing feels more like Sekiro, and actually Neo as well, now that I think about it. If you're not a Souls-like buff, then don't worry about it. All the games I listed are very good, so to have elements that remind someone of them is a positive. Code Vein less so, but that's more for aesthetics, so AI Limit doesn't suffer from being compared to that. Anyway, Khazan also has Neo's weight when it comes to traversal. You have absolutely no flexibility in midair or the ability to climb 2 feet or even jump. You'll routinely be blocked off by a wall barely taller than your head or a gap that's 3 feet long, and you just cannot overcome this. It feels like you're being held down by cinder blocks like a mafioso trying to drown you. While complaining, I come across this big red crystal, and destroying it informs me that I have destroyed a crystal. It does not say what this does, nor does anything obvious change upon destruction, but I destroyed it, and sometimes destroying a crystal is its own reward. Unless it was valuable, then that's like the opposite of a reward. Now you just lost a crystal. You could have sold that shit, maybe. Before our first boss, I want to highlight this clever shortcut they do with this wagon, because I'm so sick of doors that only open on one side and conveniently placed tree trunks to kick over perfectly sized gaps. This feels like I'm making a shortcut, like forcing one that the developers didn't intend, even though obviously they did, but it just feels so organic and creative. A+ shortcut. Now we have our first boss, which will put your blocking, dodging, and frame 1 reacting to instant grab attacks to the test. This giant frozen yeti has similar combos to the smaller ones, but also a bevy of unique attacks, like the ability to breathe frost like a dragon, or to pick up huge ice boulders and slam them down, but it's okay because you're blocking, even though you feel like you should definitely break through your block. Up to this point, you still only have the sword and axe dual wield. You'd be forgiven for thinking it's the only weapon type the game's gonna offer, because it is the only weapon type that drops as loot as of yet, which I think is a bad way to do a demo, but I also think that's just how they did the game itself. I'm jumping ahead though, we'll get to that. Still fighting a frosty troll out here. It might seem like I'm godly at this encounter, and I have to admit that I had already played this demo like a month ago, long before I had this video idea, so I have an extra hour of experience going in. Back then, this boss killed me 3 times. That goddamn grab attack just always catches me off guard. Not that it matters, since you can't guard it. But being able to react by dodging would help, but I'm an old man in gamer years, and my prime is in the rearview mirror. Anyway, we beat the boss, and then we get found by some old Eskimo lady who tells us we have to undergo the trials of the mountain or some bullshit to expel the ghost possessing us. The rest of the demo is now formatted so terribly that I hope it's for the demo and not how the game actually is at this point, because you start undergoing these trials, which are just these long stretches of snowy nothingness full of wolves and soldiers until you reach the next weapon type the game introduces to you. You pull a great sword out of the snow, which, hell yeah, this is the type of weapon I'm aching to use in a game like this. Berserker is the name of the game, and no self-respecting Berserker uses no dinky-ass weapons. Then you have a little trial fight with the weapon, you keep the weapon, you move on to the next trial weapon, which is a spear, you do that one, you keep the weapon, and then by that time an hour was up, and I was honestly more than happy to quit at that point regardless, because the last 20 minutes were trash. Fighting little ghosties with weapon types I have no interest in is lame, and they even have the gall to make the third trial the fucking dual sword and axe you've been using the whole demo, like, oh man, thanks for bringing that back. Prior to this, though, the game introduces something I had no idea existed and does make deeper of an experience, and that's skill trees. Each weapon type has its own skill trees, plus a normal one for general abilities, and from the brief look I got at some of them, they seem game-changing, including new combos and passives that aren't just do slightly more damage with this bullshit. I put 2 points into the spear tree, and all of a sudden my light attacks are doing these little moondust explosions with every hit that knock enemies back and stagger them better. It felt very dynamic and good. So which game should you get if you have to choose? Well, to start, based exclusively on the demos, they're both worth buying, especially with AI Limit's price point of $35, which it looks like Steam also has the pre-order deal of 10% off. Each game has quirks to the combat that I enjoy. They are definitely on opposite ends of the Souls-like spectrum in regard to the mechanics and feel of stuff, but there are things to like on both sides. AI Limit is smoother and lighter, with maybe more spell flexibility and a more interesting system with the sync rate stuff, and first Berserker Khazan is weightier and meatier, with expansive skill trees and combo variations, and probably more content in general if the price is anything to go by. Me? I'm a boss ranker. I gotta get both. I randomly discovered I had 15,000 PSN gold points saved up, so I redeemed all those to my wallet and practically entirely paid for Khazan's Deluxe Edition, which I got for the 3-day early access that, as I'm typing this, starts in 2 hours at 8 AM. I spent the last 5 hours making this video on a whim. Who says we don't do work out here? That gives me 3 extra days to play Khazan before AI Limit comes out, which has no early access incentive for the Deluxe Edition, and in fact the PlayStation Store doesn't even tell you what's in that shit if you look at the page. The end of the demo briefly flashes some stuff you get though, like some weapons and armor and a maid outfit because you're all degenerates. Do I think either of these games will be a 10 out of 10? Probably not. The max either one could get, in my estimation, is probably an 8, with AI Limit being more like a 7, but a 7 being half the price of an 8 is still a pretty good deal. In the end, it's up to your preference and your wallet. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos while eating a mud ball possessed by a demon, and I'll see you guys next time.